"54%, madam," he declared, making it clear that half the nation would cheerfully give up a limb to discover her secret to riches. However, the real issue remained that ordinary citizens are unable to cast ballots on the very same legislation that she can. The chamber fell completely silent. Nancy Pelosi remained exceptionally still, her hands delicately clasped together, maintaining her legendary poise exactly as she had invariably managed. Yet the cheerful expression she brought into the chamber faded away, freezing on her features like a static portrait. Resting on the desk ahead of John Kennedy was a solitary piece of paper. It was a single document featuring a handful of printed words near the upper margin and one massive numeral stamped at the lower section, and Kennedy softly placed two digits upon it, akin to holding down a grocery receipt to keep it from fluttering away in the wind. He noted, utilizing a remarkably gentle pitch, that her quote was situated at the top, whereas her monetary profit was positioned at the bottom. He clarified he had not fabricated either piece of data, but merely placed them on the exact same document, honestly acknowledging that the two distinct facts seemed to loathe being placed adjacent to one another. To comprehend how the most influential female in the history of the House of Representatives was transformed into the punchline of a quip delivered by an individual she had dismissed just an hour prior as a basic, shoeless thinker, performing a populist act for folks lacking financial portfolios, we must rewind approximately 40 minutes. We must revisit the moment Nancy Pelosi stepped into that chamber, utterly confident her aura still commanded the area exactly as it had done for 30 years. She remained equally convinced that the drawling individual positioned opposite her was entirely unworthy of her complete focus. She had successfully outlived 6 separate commanders-in-chief and scores of people who incorrectly believed they possessed greater intellect than her. She possessed the rare talent to calculate political ballots that nobody else could perceive and was capable of holding a political faction together with merely a piercing glare. She had truly merited her absolute self-assurance. Nevertheless, the primary vulnerability of 3 decades of unwavering confidence is that it creates immense blind spots, and it never crossed her mind that an individual possessing a fishing vessel and a loan document had utilized his commute to work. Visualizing her precise demeanor, this exalted circumstance, and exactly how intentionally he would schedule his challenge. The inquiry room was completely filled to capacity that morning. This was primarily due to the fact that this impending conflict had been featured in every political dispatch circulating throughout Washington during the preceding 7 days. The capital city habitually congregates to witness a partisan skirmish. The scheduled subject matter was exceptionally tedious, concerning a legislative evaluation regarding regulations for economic openness, which typically prompts individuals to exit the area. Nonetheless, rumors had circulated that Kennedy intended to interrogate Pelosi directly regarding this issue, altering the overall atmosphere. This shifted the situation because one side highlighted the unchallenged female head of her organization, Nancy Pelosi, a persona who had occupied the speaker's role on 2 occasions, controlled a challenging coalition for 2 decades, and expected absolute deference. The opposite side highlighted John Kennedy, a Louisiana lawmaker who continuously referred to himself as a basic rural lawyer, employing a slow speaking pace and a self-deprecating facade while armed with a single piece of paper and a calculated strategy. Pelosi walked in akin to royalty, arriving finally, proceeding without any haste, and donning a cream-hued outfit that was valued higher than numerous automobiles parked in the staff lot. She assumed her chair as if the seat had anticipated its entire existence for this precise privilege. She placed a slender leather binder onto the desk. She refrained from pouring her own beverage, instead allowing an aide to perform the task. When the leader of the panel formally granted her permission to speak for her introductory remarks, she offered a modest, elegant nod, the gesture of an individual completely accustomed to being appreciated merely for attending. She began by conveying appreciation to the head of the committee and promising to be brief, declaring that the subject was far less complex than certain individuals wished to portray it. Her tone was fluid, refined, and packed with the precise sort of weary tolerance an adult utilizes when attempting to clarify a concept to an infant for the 2nd consecutive occasion. She declared that within particular sectors of the legislative sphere there exists a profound, unrelenting bitterness regarding prosperity, calling it a partisan strategy fueled by jealousy. She argued this narrative convinces the public that anyone possessing immense riches must have engaged in unlawful activities, that possessing wealth indicates you are a wrongdoer, and that the solitary method to assist working-class households is to destroy anyone who has constructed something of value. She allowed her gaze to wander momentarily toward Kennedy, and the edges of her lips curled upward. She highlighted that although this is an appealing tale that resonates exceptionally well in specific rural town halls, it necessitates absolutely zero genuine comprehension of how economic markets genuinely operate. She added that this was very opportune because the individuals promoting this tale typically possess no such expertise. A muted murmur shifted through the attendees, and it was evidently not a noise of consensus. Pelosi pushed forward, finding her rhythm and experiencing certainty in her stance, asserting she had dedicated her entire existence to serving the populace rather than hoarding wealth. She proclaimed she would emphatically decline to be educated on financial affairs by an individual who supposedly enjoys acting the role of an unshod rural philosopher for television viewers. She conceded that, although this act might be entertaining and quite endearing, being endearing is absolutely not equivalent to being knowledgeable, and possessing a Southern inflection cannot substitute for genuinely comprehending what a corporate stock option entails. She asserted that whereas specific individuals comprehend how the contemporary marketplace functions, others simply perform a theatrical act for citizens who consider factual reality slightly too complex to manage. She stopped for a moment, altering her tone to appear compassionate, which ultimately resonated with everybody tuning in across the nation, excluding her devoted followers as a condescending pat on the head. She unambiguously declared she possessed genuine compassion for those particular individuals, ensuring her sympathy was apparent. She expressed she comprehended that when a person is worrying about their grocery expenses, the convoluted sphere of the financial exchange can appear as an alien dialect. She acknowledged it is alluring to point fingers at a convenient antagonist, but argued that genuine governance entails dispensing difficult realities rather than indulging people's furious grievances. She portrayed governance as comprehending the system adequately enough to utilize it correctly, even if that aptitude appears as an unjust advantage to an individual who fails to grasp it. This was an astonishing remark to utter into a live microphone, even for her. She had essentially informed the viewing public individually that they were tainted with jealousy, that they lacked intellect, that they were incapable of comprehending economics, and lastly, that they ought to be incredibly grateful for her profound compassion concerning these three flaws. She had characterized 40 years of phenomenal individual economic triumph as simply understanding the system, virtually challenging anyone observing to label it as its true nature. In merely 3 minutes, she had informed millions of citizens observing from break rooms, kitchen tables, and trucks that they were unrefined, jealous individuals, too slow to figure out the financial world, and effortlessly tricked by a politician with a similar accent. She articulated this utilizing the soothing, slightly arrogant rhythm of a woman who decided long ago she was the only responsible adult in the room. Furthermore, she was absolutely convinced her speech had functioned flawlessly. It had indeed succeeded, however, she had merely neglected to verify who was holding the piece of paper. If you have ever been informed by a wealthy individual in an extravagantly costly outfit that you are not wealthy because you lack the intellect to grasp money, and that your complaints are merely concealed envy, you need to pay close attention, because Nancy Pelosi just uttered precisely that to your face on live television with a smile. The rural attorney she just labeled as nothing more than endearing was holding a single document prepared to ruin her day. John Kennedy exhibited zero emotion, which constituted the initial mistake Pelosi made regarding who he was, and it absolutely would not be her last. He remained seated with his glasses slipped down his nose precisely as individuals claimed he did, his fingers laced together above the solitary document, permitting her insulting words to drift past him akin to a foul odor emanating from the hallway. He had been talked down to by seasoned experts previously. When the committee leader gave him his turn, he did not reach for an angry comeback. Instead, Kennedy thanked the Madam Speaker, his Louisiana voice rolling out as slow and friendly as a front porch in July. He expressed gratitude for her remarks, saying she was totally right about his character, and praised her for doing her homework. He agreed he was indeed sweet, causing a ripple of laughs from his political friends. He also agreed with her statement that he did not understand the stock market, confessing he kept most of his money in a credit union in Baton Rouge that sometimes gave him a complimentary toaster. He shared that his biggest financial move was buying a fishing boat, a choice his wife was still mad about, which brought even bigger laughs from the crowd. Because of this, he announced he would need her help today since she was the proven expert, as she had just announced herself, while he was just a regular guy with a boat he could not really pay for. He expressed a wish to talk about some exact numbers, specifically her numbers, and nicely asked her to help a simple guy understand them. Pelosi gave a stiff smile, saying she was always happy to teach. Kennedy replied he was hoping she would say that, warning her to get ready because they were going to need a lot of teaching. The core reality about a man like Kennedy is that his slow speed is his main weapon. People watch him waiting for his final point, not realizing that making them wait was the actual goal, and that he was slowly walking them exactly where he wanted them to go while they thought he was just rambling. Kennedy suggested beginning with a simple fact about her family's stock market trades from the prior year. He explained how he had asked a very smart junior worker, a young lady much brighter than him, to pull the public financial records. He shared that this worker told him Pelosi's investments shot up by roughly 54% over the past year. He looked over his glasses, his face completely friendly, saying the number 54 again. He stated he had to ask his worker to explain it more because his mind could not handle such complicated math. The worker then told him that the whole stock market, mainly the giant S&P index, went up by about 23% during that same time, a number that professionals view as an incredibly good year. He stopped for a careful second. He then summarized that the Madam Speaker did not just beat the regular market, she almost doubled its speed in one single year starting from zero. Pelosi's smile dropped a notch as she explained that her husband handles their money. She protected him as a veteran professional, an investment expert with decades of real-world knowledge, and she strictly reminded the senator that there is nothing wrong or illegal about a regular citizen making smart investments. Kennedy threw up a hand, looking truly shocked that she would think he meant that, promising her he was definitely not claiming anyone broke the rules. Instead, he explained he was saying the outcomes were incredibly amazing, guessing her family must be the most fortunate household in the whole United States of America. He said the 54% number again. He compared this by sharing his credit union gave him a measly 4% profit the year before, saying this small win made him feel like a rich billionaire. He joked about calling his wife to announce they were basically rich, and she told him to sit down before he hurt himself. He pointed out his 4% profit compared to her massive 54%, noting she made 10 times the money as the slow guy from Baton Rouge. Furthermore, he pointed out she did this amazing thing from a desk inside the United States Congress during her free time while also managing the nation, a comment that caused the room to laugh. He stated he was simply trying to understand the incredible brilliance of it. He politely suggested that if her family has the power to beat the market average by 2 times every year, he could not figure out what on earth she was doing working in Congress. He hinted she could be the wealthiest woman on earth, saying Wall Street would pull a giant truck full of cash right up to her front steps. He clearly asked why she would throw away such an amazing talent on a government paycheck. Pelosi claimed the senator was asking a purposely stupid question. Kennedy happily nodded, calling himself a purposely stupid man and requesting she indulge him by detailing exactly where a government worker learns to pick winning stocks like that. Watch his method closely. He does not make any direct attacks. He is only giving her compliments. He is calling her a mastermind and saying she is the luckiest lady alive, but every single phrase cuts like a blade because everyone watching at home is doing the calculations. He is comparing his 4% bank profit against the speaker's 54%. Pelosi opened her mouth to say something cold and permanent, but Kennedy pulled a trick no one in the room anticipated. He lifted the single piece of paper, and he did not shake it around or get loud. He just read the words printed across the top margin. He named these quotes as her own statements from a speech she had delivered. A solid speech, he added, saying he read the whole thing and thought it was okay. He spoke slowly and respectfully. He read her saying that a solid middle class is the foundation of our success, and he pointed out her demand for tax changes that would guarantee all citizens pay their fair share. He placed the paper down. He praised that lovely thought, like showing real agreement that the richest should pay their fair share and the middle class is the foundation, stating he would vote for those words himself. Then he touched the bottom of the document where the one giant number was placed. He named this as her second number, 54% from basically the exact same year. He glanced up, his face showing pure, honest confusion, a guy truly attempting to make two pieces fit. He described that this was where a rural attorney gets confused. He highlighted that the woman who delivers speeches about the richest paying their fair share and the family that beat the whole stock market by 2 times from inside the United States Congress are the exact same woman. He admitted he could not get the statement at the top of the document to shake hands with the digit at the bottom, pointing out they kept turning away from each other. The first genuine laugh escaped then, echoing up from the balcony. A guy wearing a farming hat covered his face with his hand. Next to him, a lady who had arrived doubtful with her arms crossed, the sort who doubts all politicians naturally, was nodding currently, slowly, because the math had made sense to her as well. That was the truth about the two figures. They did not require a political party, and they did not require a team. A lecture about equality and a profit that doubled the market, resting on the same document in the same year belonging to one person. Anyone could understand it, and everyone did. Pelosi reacted the way she always reacted when things got shaky, which was to sit up straighter and become more freezing and royal, trying to make the crowd feel that laughing was beneath the respect of the position she held. She declared she would state this one time, and the coldness of it could have frozen a window. She stated that every financial move in her home had been totally and correctly reported following the exact letter of the law. She repeated her spouse is a skilled money manager and said she found it entirely expected and insulting that a victorious female cannot gather money in America without a guy pointing at her and implying with a country smile that she had to have broken the rules. She stated she had spent 4 decades being looked down upon by guys just like the senator, telling him she was accustomed to it. It was a powerful tactic that had succeeded 1,000 times prior, claiming jealousy, claiming sexism, and building a fortress of pride. For a second, the crowd swayed with her. Journalists' pens scribbled. The laughing faded away, and the old habit washed through the room, the practiced urge to step away from a strong female claiming unfair treatment. It lasted for roughly 20 seconds. Then Kennedy stopped playing nice for the first time, and the country rhythm remained in his speech, but something solid and sharp emerged beneath it. He warned the Madam Speaker that he wished to be very cautious because she had forced words into his mouth and he did not enjoy how they tasted. He maintained he never said she cheated, and he had not said a single time that she violated a rule. He pointed out she constantly told him her investments were lawful and he trusted her entirely. He leaned closer, naming this as a section she was wishing nobody would see. He concurred they were lawful, but asked who drafted the Stock Act, the legislation that dictates what a congressional representative can and cannot do with investments. He replied that Congress did. She and her allies drafted the rule book for their very own match. His tone remained steady as he detailed that when she claims she obeyed the rules, he believes her, but she assisted in writing those exact rules. He provided a comparison, explaining it is not difficult to remain inside a boundary when you are the person who got to choose where to build the boundary. A guy can be the most law-abiding person in the region if he drafts the legislation in the morning and lives his life in the afternoon. He repeated she did not violate the law. She had it sized, snipped, and sewn to match the way a skilled clothes maker does a jacket. He scolded her for standing up and announcing to people she is perfectly legal, like that ends the argument, as if the regulations dropped from the clouds instead of from a meeting room down the corridor. He exposed the secret, stating the regulations are not a boundary someone constructed around her. They are a boundary she constructed around herself, containing a door, and she possesses the only key while continuously telling everyone how carefully she stays within it. The chuckle that erupted next was biting, and Pelosi's jaw raised a fraction of an inch. She was accustomed to laughing in a space. She had been the reason for it, the victim of it, and the controller of it for more time than most of the audience had been breathing. However, this was a separate kind of laughing, and she recognized the change the way a boatman recognizes a shift in the breeze. This was not the sound of folks enjoying her. It was the sound of folks who were no longer amazed. He had just stated it clearly. She did not violate the regulations. She drafted them, then existed by them, then requested an award for remaining within the boundary she constructed. Proceeding with the topic of the rule book, Kennedy continued as relaxed as a Sunday, proposing to share a brief tale because he enjoys a solid mystery. A couple of years ago, some decent people in Congress from both sides united and drafted a very basic piece of legislation. It declared that lawmakers and their husbands or wives should not be permitted to buy and sell specific stocks whatsoever, removing the entire issue from consideration and stopping the questions regarding 54% returns. He rubbed his jaw, acting like a man remembering something, and pointed out that the legislation gained momentum, cleared the committee and folks were thrilled. However, then simply disappeared. It never reached the main floor, never received its chance to be voted on, and perished quietly in a hidden room. He glanced up, pretending to be uneducated, and requesting assistance concerning whose responsibility it was for a very long time to determine which legislation reached the main floor and which pieces perished quietly in a hidden room. He inquired who possessed that gavel. Pelosi remained silent, since everybody in the chamber understood whose responsibility that had been. Kennedy quietly mumbled about the strange universe. He pointed out that the single piece of legislation in the entirety of Washington that would have prevented the 54%, the single piece of legislation that would have ended the entire issue permanently, somehow could never locate its way to the main floor year after year. The individual who determined which legislation reached the floor and which pieces silently failed is the exact same individual whose family happened to be recording 54% returns. He sarcastically stated he was confident that was a random chance. Claiming he trusts in random chances, he simply had never in his existence witnessed one remain so motionless and look so beautiful for the photographers. Down the platform, a young Democratic member, one of the fresh reformers who had campaigned pledging to fix exactly this issue, moved toward her microphone. She did not protect Pelosi. Rather, she deliberately announced for the official record that many of them had desired to prohibit lawmakers from stock trading for a long time. She stated it ought to have occurred ages ago, and the reality that it has not is not a fact this political group should be happy about. She then leaned back. This tiny intentional gap, one Democrat refusing to sync with another, communicated more than any speech could. When an assistant behind Pelosi mumbled something, and Pelosi grabbed once more for the words of victimhood concerning a successful female being targeted, a female lawmaker on Kennedy's side stopped it. She announced with politeness that she is a female who created some wealth of her own, and the digit on that document does not have a man or woman hiding behind it. She proclaimed that targeting a successful female is disrespectful to every female who truly created something, the truthful, gradual way without a position on the group that drafts the regulations. She warned against doing that because it was lower than her. Pelosi's fingers shifted very slightly on the desk. Kennedy allowed the chamber to calm down, and then his tone shifted, sinking deeper and slower as the joking disappeared from it. The audience leaned forward to listen. He announced he wished to cease being humorous for a moment because there is a piece of this that the people at home sense in their stomachs, and they have the right to hear someone state it clearly. He placed his palm flat next to the document. He continuously returned to the 54% not because it was illegal, but due to who it excluded. He stopped. He talked about a lady in Monroe, Louisiana, who labored 38 years at a medical center. She performed everything correctly. She hoarded her money, placed a little into her pension fund every single month, and never skipped even the months it was painful. She cut out discount tickets so she could continue contributing. During the prior year, the greatest year the financial markets had seen recently, she earned her 4 or perhaps 5%. Still, she could not sleep regardless because the cost of food consumed the majority of it, and she is terrified the funds will vanish before she passes away. She possesses a figure in her mind where she can ultimately quit laboring, and every single year that figure moves farther out of reach. She is unable to understand why because she is performing everything they ever instructed her to do. His tone sank as he announced she followed the actual regulations drafted for ordinary citizens, and she received 4% and a tight feeling in her gut. The chamber had become incredibly silent. He observed that up here from one of the most authoritative chairs that decides the fate of the exact businesses inside the investments, the family receives 10 times what the lady received. Concurrently, the woman in that chair delivers lectures regarding how the rules are stacked against laborers. He nodded his head slowly, announcing that is the piece that is not humorous. He informed the Madam Speaker she is not participating in the identical game as that lady in Monroe, and she is not on the identical playing ground. She is participating in a game where she assisted in drafting the regulations from a chair the second lady will never occupy, possessing details she will never acquire, and then delivers her a lecture regarding equality. He explained the lady is not jealous, rather she is simply exhausted of being informed the individuals who stacked the deck care about her the most. She is capable of doing the math comparing 4 and 54. It is the single thing no one ever needed to educate her on because she already understood it deep down. No one chuckled at that statement, and no one applauded. It reached a place deeper than either reaction. He simply stated the reality regarding the woman in Monroe with her 4% and the tightness in her gut. Pelosi attempted to bounce back using the only method she understood, which was to rise up using the power of a lifetime of pride. She raised her jaw, located her booming voice that had kicked off massive events, and commenced speaking regarding a lifetime of government duty, the burdens of being a leader, and how the future would recall who battled for laboring households. However, the chamber had transformed, and she was much too intelligent not to notice it transforming beneath her. The booming voice tumbled into a quietness that no longer swelled up to support it. Journalists had ceased scribbling, and her peers had discovered a complete obsession with the wood patterns of the desk. The rhythm she had relied on her entire existence to command a chamber was commanding nobody currently, fading away phrase by phrase akin to an ocean wave withdrawing from the sand. The most terrible aspect the cameras recorded was that she continued anyway, grasping for the next booming phrase because the act was all there had ever been. To cease acting now meant confessing there had never been anything new with the act except a digit on a document. Kennedy allowed her to continue all the way to the finish, which served as its own specific type of judgment. Once she had finished, he pushed the solitary piece of paper a couple of inches over the desk in her direction. He admitted she had aided the citizens for a long duration, and no one can remove those 40 years from her record. He allowed it to rest. He concluded by telling her that somewhere in there, the public started serving her back. Those words achieved what 60 minutes of debate could not. Pelosi's arm shifted without her actively ordering it to, grabbing the thin, shiny timepiece on her left arm, a long-standing habit of calming herself by rotating the strap a fraction of an inch. Then she realized where the lenses and every stare had tracked her movement, focusing on the tiny, gleaming, costly object resting there. Gradually and intentionally, she pulled the edge of her cream-colored shirt down over the timepiece until it vanished, crossed both hands on her lap, and refrained from uttering a single extra syllable. The hiding of it spoke volumes louder than anything she might have uttered. When questioned if she wanted to answer, she refused. The story of that historic afternoon definitely did not end the second the Madam Speaker fell into a shocked, beaten quietness. Very quickly, the hungry online world grabbed hold of the interaction. A carefully cut 90-second movie clip started spreading with intense speed, showing the exact destructive series of events. Senator Kennedy's slow Southern voice reading her passionate statement regarding all citizens paying a fair share, right before the steady tap of his finger on the bold number showing a massive 54% stock profit. This video was everywhere, bleeding into every monitor and internet site before the hearing room had even totally cleared out its crowd. The most disturbing part for Pelosi was the total and complete lack of arguments about the law. The citizens of America were not fighting about government rules or if lawmakers trading stocks was technically allowed. Instead, they were completely captivated by the absolute two-faced nature of the images. Millions observed a lawmaker who had earlier brushed off the country's money worries as simple jealousy be faced with her own righteous words brutally colliding with her own massive wealth statistics. The citizens watched as those two totally opposite facts stubbornly refused to match up or belong together. As a result, the big evening news channels scrapped their scheduled shows, deciding instead to start their nightly broadcasts with the picture of that solitary piece of paper and Kennedy's destructive final words, "Ayase." By the moment the sun came up the next day, the political environment had permanently broken. The fresh, change-focused Democrat who had spoken up against the leadership during the meeting went officially on the record, using the energy to aggressively push her demand for a total prohibition on lawmakers buying and selling individual stocks. Her recorded message echoed strongly, moving much further and quicker around the country than the actual suggested law ever had. Still, underneath the justified anger rested a bleak, sour little joke concerning human behavior and current economics. In the direct wake of the widely shared clash, the different money companies and phone programs that let regular everyday investors closely follow and copy the speaker's market investments saw an unheard-of gigantic spike in fresh account creations. The exact event that was supposed to act as a deep insult had accidentally worked as the greatest commercial, aggressively reminding the whole nation just how incredibly profitable those exact market profits were. A working-class citizen who had wasted his day chuckling loudly at the video of Pelosi's public embarrassment was, by dinner time, busily installing a wealth tracking program focused on her investments. The mental reasoning behind this was savagely basic. 4% is purely 4%, and 54% is undeniably 54%. Every person in the nation suddenly urgently desired a chair at her expensive table because Kennedy had made it crystal clear exactly how lucrative her private game genuinely was. The politician had definitely managed to embarrass her on a countrywide platform, and the nation had participated with him in chuckling at her expense. But afterward, the nation pulled a rapid turn, rushing wildly to jump straight into her stock accounts to partake in the winnings. It served as the ultimate pessimistic evidence of a global reality, proving the casino always triumphs. Away from the blinding bulbs of the meeting room, the brutal reality of the event was freely admitted. A veteran Democratic campaign planner, trapped by a journalist in the winding hallways of the Capitol building, softly confessed what the political insiders had deeply worried about for a long time. Everybody in Washington basically understood that this lawmaker stock trading problem would eventually turn into a disastrous political weakness. This planner sharply pointed out that in America, a lawmaker can effortlessly survive being incredibly rich, mostly because the voting public generally respects riches. But what a lawmaker fundamentally cannot outlast is the pairing of giving a preachy fair share lecture while at the same time recording an unbelievable 54% yearly profit, particularly when a self-proclaimed ordinary guy, equipped with nothing except a standard bank account and a fishing boat, recites those two clashing realities back-to-back straight to your face. In that painful 90-second time frame, she was conclusively trapped acting like the precise character she had burned 40 years aggressively promising she was fighting. She was totally revealed as the supreme disconnected insider, the advantaged rule-maker, profiting from the exact structure she professed to oversee. This was an emergency resistant to normal political excuses. There is completely no carefully worded media statement, no smart proxy sent on to the weekend morning political discussion programs, and no wordy explanation that can possibly repair the damning truth of a solid, calculated figure stamped on a document right beside a meaningless political lecture. Having completely achieved the precise goal he had carefully planned upon walking into the meeting, Senator John Kennedy managed his much-awaited departure with the exact identical, deliberately slow, unhurried pace that had acted as the unquestionable signature of his whole destructive questioning. There were no dramatic speeches or flashy movements as he finished breaking down the influential political leader in front of him. Instead, his actions were defined by a deadly exactness. He held that single, disastrous piece of paper, the exact document that had smoothly compared her high-minded words against her unbelievable money realities, and he creased it sharply and flawlessly down its middle line. With measured pace, he slipped the now folded document safely into the inside pocket of his custom suit coat, making sure it was hidden away just as silently as it had been shown. He then went on to simply stroll directly out of the grand meeting room, fundamentally refusing to speak a single extra word to anyone there. He did not stop for reporters, and he did not give any casual comments to the shocked workers talking quietly among themselves. He casually walked past the messy, wild bursts of the gathered media cameras and totally ignored the quiet, heavy feeling of the leader's seating area at the front of the space. There, Nancy Pelosi sat apparently paralyzed, a picture of frozen disbelief, her gaze fixed sharply and without blinking on the custom edge of her own cream-colored sleeve, where she had just quickly concealed her pricey luxury timepiece from the public eye. It was a reality universally acknowledged by every veteran political watcher of the Capitol building that she would, without a single shred of doubt, manage to politically outlast this vicious, highly televised public clash. Individuals of her massive importance and deeply rooted systemic influence do not simply vanish overnight. They have spent decades constructing intricate networks of loyalty and defensive political machinery. Therefore, these titans of the establishment always inevitably discover a calculated method to survive the short-term crisis and fiercely keep their hold on power. She had weathered countless storms before, navigating treacherous partisan waters with practiced ease. The expectation was that by the following week, the news cycle would churn forward, new scandals would emerge, and the political establishment would seamlessly close ranks around her. Even so, despite the certainty of her institutional survival, an undeniable core break had occurred inside the very air of that grand hearing room. It was an invisible but palpable rupture, letting loose a deep, seismic change in the political pole that absolutely could not be rolled back, painted over, or erased by any amount of clever public relations spin. The perfect, seemingly impenetrable shield of righteous advocacy that she had burned 40 exhausting years carefully building had been permanently and spectacularly broken. For 4 decades, she had successfully marketed herself as the ultimate champion of the working class and the tireless defender of the downtrodden. That carefully curated persona, which had served as her most reliable armor through countless election cycles, lay shattered on the polished mahogany desk. The illusion of solidarity had evaporated, leaving behind the stark reality of an elite insider totally detached from the daily financial terrors of the citizens she claimed to represent. The room knew it, the cameras captured it, and the viewers at home felt it profoundly. Senator John Kennedy had ultimately gained exactly what he had walked into that imposing space to get, executing his strategy with the devastating precision of a master tactician. He did not need to shout, posture earned, or engage in theatrical grandstanding to claim his victory. Instead, he simply stood up and quietly left the chamber, carrying with him a single sheet of printer paper. He had creased it only one time, right down the center, folding away the damning evidence of her financial hypocrisy with deliberate calmness. In terms of physical properties, that folded document materially held basically zero measurable heaviness. It was a flimsy, insignificant scrap of wood pulp that would not even register on a standard postal scale. Yet, as he slipped it into the breast pocket of his suit jacket, it bore a massive, unmeasurable weight of pure, undeniable honesty that was already echoing profoundly throughout the whole country. It was the weight of a sudden, collective realization rapidly transmitting through television screens to reach every corner of the nation. As the huge, grand stories of human history have continually and again shown us, the absolute heaviest, most historically important, and most deeply earth-shaking items in the universe almost never show up on a physical weighing device, nor can they be easily quantified by traditional standards. They cannot be measured in heavy pounds, basic ounces, or massive metric tons. Instead, the true gravity of these monumental historical turning points is judged entirely by the destructive, permanent, and lasting mark they create in the collective thoughts, beliefs, and everyday memories of the citizens. The folded paper was merely a physical vessel for a profound realization that was fundamentally rewiring the entire public consciousness. It represented the exact moment when the heavy curtain was finally pulled back, exposing the vast, hidden machinery of self-enrichment operating under the honorable guise of public service. Now, this singular moment of revelation succeeded in exposing the true, devastating cost of entrenched political hypocrisy. It was a cost paid not by the lawmakers insulated by their wealth and insider knowledge, but by the struggling laborers who had played by the rules their entire lives. John Kennedy's quiet departure and the lingering silence of the speaker forever cemented the undeniable, mathematically impossible difference between the meager 4% return of a working-class retirement account and the staggering 54% financial windfall of a privileged elite.